So with that, we've looked at the left side of the bracket. Now let's move on to the right. We've got some really interesting teams, including my little Gophers. We'll get to them at the end, but let's start at the top with Baylor, one of the most interesting teams in the country, played at times like the best team in the country. Let's see what we're getting now out of the Baylor Bears. Baylor's still the fifth ranked team in net, 27-7 on the season, 12-6 in the Big 12. Big 12 had a good year, and Baylor was one of the best teams consistently throughout the season. But they started the year 17-0, looked to be the best team in the country, featuring one of the best players in the country. Baylor seemed to have so much going for them, and then the Big 12 just kind of became a slog. They really struggled late in the year in Big 12 matchups, and that included some really bad losses. You, of course, have the one we just watched last night, the 18-point loss to Iowa State in the Big 12 final. You also have a 17-point loss on the road to Texas late in the year, a 26-point loss at home to Iowa State, a game where Keaton just went nuts and Baylor couldn't keep up. And you also have one where just a complete embarrassment for this team, 31 points at Press Virginia, not a good showing for Baylor. So you've seen some really bad performances late in the year, and it kind of makes you wonder, this team started 17-0, hot and as good as anyone in the country, still seem to be one of the better teams in the country, but did they peak at the wrong time? If your answer is no, then the other concern you may have is this a team that just gives up a little too easy? And that really comes down to the offense. This is a team that is ranked 144th offensively in offensive rating, 5th defensive rating. Very good defensive team, but seems to not be able to always figure it out on offense. They're completely led by that Bears defense. They bear down, only allowing 67 points a game. That's the 18th best mark in the country. But this is a team that when it's not working offensively, when Andre Alexander the Great is just good, it usually spells trouble for Baylor. This is not a good shooting team. They rank 323rd in the nation in three-point percentage, but they're good on the boards. They beat you inside. They get really good looks offensively, but not enough of those shots are falling. If they fall a little bit more in the tournament like they did early in the year, Baylor could absolutely be a Final Four team. They have the horses to do it. But the concern would be that it seems they're not playing their best basketball right now and had some really bad losses where maybe they gave up a bit or just couldn't figure it out on offense. And that could be because teams are keying a little bit more on Andre Alexander. He's still having a phenomenal season. The numbers and averages are down a little bit. 23 points a game, 8.7 rebounds, 2 assists, and 1.4 steals and 1.4 blocks per game. Great. All around, fantastic player. But not an efficient scorer. Really just a bucket getter. He gets the line, 9 free throw attempts per game. That's important, but takes a lot of shots, doesn't shoot a great percentage, but is so important in what Baylor does on those nights where he's on and he's putting up 30. And we've seen it multiple times this season. They're so hard to beat. It's so hard to beat when this guy's hot, but too often he forces it a bit. If he doesn't have it, the concern would be who steps up. It's probably those 2 other senior starters for Baylor, Colin Clark or Allen Jennings. They are going to be incredibly important to Baylor in the tournament. Starting with Colin Clark, he's a very streaky shooter, averaging 11 points a game and 6 assists. So Colin Clark has proven to be a capable point guard, but someone that when the shot isn't falling, his game can fall apart a little bit. Then you also have Allen Jennings, very important defender, somebody who can guard 2 through 4, averaging 9 points a game, but is taking 6 3-point attempts per game and only making a quarter of them. That is not good enough. Colin Clark and Allen Jennings have to step up for Baylor if they're going to make a deep run in this tournament. I think they have the ability. They showed it early in the season that they can do it. If Andre Alexander is back to being the 30-10 guy we saw early in the year, if Clark and Jennings have it going, it seems this team could beat anyone on the right night. The problem is when they don't have it, things can fall apart and fall apart quickly. I'm not too worried about Baylor early. And I hope that bit of confidence is good for them and it doesn't make them arrogant because I think they've got a good opportunity to get to the second weekend. But past there, I'm a little concerned about Baylor. The first team that's going to have an opportunity to knock them off in the NCAA tournament is Montana State. Montana State, the Bobcats, 19-14 on the season, 10-10 in the Big Sky, an average Big Sky team. They were the 7th seed going into the Big Sky tournament. They had a little momentum at the end of the year. They were 7-3 in their last 10. And then they turned it on in the Big Sky tournament, won all 4 of those games, including beating Eastern Washington 95-83 in overtime in the Big Sky quarterfinals. That also happens to be probably their best win of the season. It's their only quad 2 win of the year. And then in the semis, they thrashed Idaho State, had a matchup against Southern Utah in the finals, beat them by 16. This is a team that seems to have figured something out in the Big Sky tournament, but now you got Baylor, right? Like you're dealing with a different monster. And I think that's the concern, because this is a team that struggled all year offensively, 263rd offensive rating, a good defensive team, 34th defensive rating, the best defensive team in the Big Sky all year. They're good on the boards, good interior defense. Again, if it's strength versus strength and you're trying to match Baylor at what they do best, I think Montana State is going to struggle, but they have a couple guards that I think could make this game interesting. If they're able to be competitive on the boards, and Montana State has proven to be all year, they're 26 nationally in rebounds per game, then Andy Metcalf and those backcourt players for Montana State may have an opportunity to make something of that game. Andy Metcalf is the only senior contributor on this Montana State team, averaging 16 points, 4 rebounds, and 3 assists a game. If Metcalf is cooking, it's a tough matchup for Baylor. And if they can figure out something from outside, like they did in the Big Sky tournament, maybe they can get some momentum going. The problem is they don't really want to play that way. They, really want to challenge teams inside and play an inside-out style of basketball. That kind of plays to Baylor's strengths, and I think they're going to be in for a long, long afternoon when they match up against the Baylor Bears. A good season for Montana State. Kind of like I said with Cal State Fullerton, they may just be celebrating a Big Sky tournament championship. They're going to hang a banner, and it may be a quick tip of the cap in and out of the NCAA tournament for Montana State. All right, we're rolling now. Just 3 more matchups to talk about, 6 more teams in total, and we're going to start it with a 7-10 matchup, Colorado and Illinois State. This is probably, of all the games in the NCAA tournament this year, the most underseeded versus overseeded matchup we have. Colorado, 45th in net ranking, a 7 seed. Illinois State, a 10 seed, incredibly underseeded, 33 net ranking, and a team that I think is much better than how they were seeded and treated by that committee. Let's start again with the Buffs before I get into Illinois State. You may already see a little bit of bias forming for the Cardinals, but let's talk about the Buffs. 22-8 on the year, 14-4 in Pac-12 play. They had won 4 straight. They were kind of rolling end of the year going into the Pac-12 tourney, and just kind of gave up a dud, a loss to Arizona State in the quarterfinals. But this is a team that is very good offensively, can fill it up, 83 points per game. That's the 4th best total in the country. It's an efficient offense, a very good offense, 13th offensive rating, but a team that can get themselves in some trouble defensively. They're giving up 76 points a game. It's 300th in the country, 106th defensive rating. So a team that will live by how that offense is cooking. They share the ball really well, 20 assists per game. That's 5th in the nation. It's a really fun team to watch. They're probably going to play. They've played in a lot of high-scoring games. I would expect that maybe in the tournament they could find themselves in 1 or 2 more high-scoring games. They're led by 3 senior guards, Matt McKay, D. Rowland, and Jason Keys. Highest-scoring player on the team is McKay, averaging 17 a game. He just gets buckets. He's not efficient, not going to shoot at a great percentage. He's always going to give himself a green light, always shooting daggers, always looking for the heat check. But McKay's had multiple 20-point outings. I think someone that is very important to Colorado if they want to make a run in this tournament, because if he is on and that offense is rolling, they're difficult to deal with. Those other 2 senior guards that I mentioned, D. Rowland and Jason Keys, they're each averaging double-digit points scored, 9 assists combined, Rowland and Keys. They're very important, but they've also given up a lot. Not great defenders. It puts a lot of pressure on Colorado to take advantage of every offensive possession. They've done a good job of it throughout the year. They did a really nice job of it late in the year against the Pac-12. But this is a team that if you test them, if you make it a half-court game, you slow it down a bit, and you put a lot of pressure on the ball, Colorado may be in some trouble. And I think that's what makes this first-round matchup so interesting. Illinois State's coming in clearly with a chip on their shoulder, thinking that they're underseeded. Let's move on now to the Cardinals, because I think, again, real tough matchup in the first round for the Buffs. So if I just laid out the formula on how you beat Colorado, it also happens to be the way Illinois State plays. They had a really nice year, 25-9, 12-6 in the Missouri Valley. They were the 2 seed heading in to the Missouri Valley. And so much of that was because when teams had to travel to Illinois State, most times they were not coming back with a win. They were 14-1, the Cardinals were, at home. Struggled a bit on the road, but late in the year, were playing really good basketball. 8-2 in their last 10 games. They won all 3 of their games in the Missouri Valley Conference tournament to take home that title. This is a team that, they're going to play slow. They play at a nice offensive clip, pretty efficient. Not much spark on offense, but they don't need it because of how good they play defensively. 82nd offensive rating, 32nd defensive rating for the Cardinals, only allowing 68 points per game. They're led by a big man that I think a lot of power conference teams would like to have. Reggie Dawson is a junior that's averaging 13 points and 5 rebounds per game. Those may not seem like great numbers, but Illinois State plays a deep bench. They have 10 players averaging 10 minutes per game, and they rely on that bench and staying fresh on the court. That's really been the key to a lot of their success this season. They're a very balanced team. They don't turn the ball over. They play very smart in a very intense man-to-man style on defense. And with that deep rotation where you're constantly keeping people fresh and you can put that type of pressure on teams and stay fresh like that, that's really tough. I think it's going to be tough for Colorado. Colorado has those guards that may be able to shoot themselves out of trouble, but Illinois State may be able to bang inside with Reggie Dawson and go 10, 11 deep like they have all year. And if they can make things hard on Colorado, you could be looking for an upset alert in the 7-10 game. Really like Illinois State in that game. I think they're, besides being underseeded and coming into this tournament with a chip on their shoulder, the Redbirds have an opportunity to do something special here. I think it's a team that could make a run. They've played really good basketball all year. Late in the year, seem to be getting it together. Because of that, I like Illinois State to get out of that first game and maybe even give Baylor some troubles in that second round game if they get there. Back to the bracket, and we only have one more quadrant to focus on. It includes my Gophers. I'm going to start with a 6-11 game, Oregon, Virginia. Then we'll move on to Minnesota and UMass Lowell. And let's start with the Ducks, another Pac-12 team in this region, 28th net ranking. Very good year for the Ducks, 23-9, 13-5 in Pac-12 play. But they're coming off 2 losses late in the year. Lost to USC by 5 in the season finale. And then in the Pac-12 quarterfinals, their first game in the Pac-12 tournament, they lose by 4 to Washington. Like we said, Washington gave teams fits with that zone all season. And it was a similar story for Oregon in that game. And those 2 games really kind of highlighted some of the issues that Oregon had late in the year. Oregon started the year 16-3, but ended at 7-6. And this was a team that early in the season, you thought one of the favorites in the Pac-12, seemed to be playing really good offensively, and things just kind of quieted down and they didn't quite play to the level they did early in the year. Still ended up as the 22nd offensive rating in the nation, 73rd defensive rating. They're averaging 81 points per game. It's best for 13th in the nation. It's a very active defense. They're 6th in the nation in steals with 9.8 per game. And that leads to a lot of easy buckets in transition. But as the open court giveth, it taketh away. They also kind of struggle in transition basketball. That offense definitely more comfortable in the half court. They've had the same 5 starters all year, only 1 senior. And this team has really been led by Kevin Price, who has been a killer in the half court. He's averaging 20 points per game, 41% from 3, 1.8 steals per game. So he gets those easy buckets, but has really lived at taking advantage of teams in the half court. He doesn't get to the rim, but he's still averaging 9 free throws per game. Not a great interior scorer, but someone that finds a lot of and one opportunities. Price is someone that, is not afraid to challenge someone one-on-one. And it gets him to the line at a good clip. And because of that, he's averaged over 20 points per game all season. And he is the motor that drives this Ducks team. Unfortunately, they're just not playing their best basketball right now. And throughout the year, when they've been tested by better teams, they've struggled. Only 3-6 in quad 1 games. I think that's a concern for Oregon. And that is a style that plays right into the strengths of Virginia and is going to make that matchup real interesting. So, hey, I think it's time to talk about the Cavs. The 11 seed Virginia Cavaliers, 40th in net ranking, 19-15 overall record, 12-8 in the ACC. They were 7-3 in their last 10. I think you sense a bit of a pattern here when I'm talking about the New Orleans region. A lot of teams playing good basketball late in the year. They were the 5 seed heading into the ACC tournament. Had a nice little run, but ended up losing in the semifinals to Pitt by 4. This was a team that at one point in the year, early in the year, couldn't really figure it out. And when the calendar flipped to February, the Cavs sat at 10-12. Since February 1st, they are 9-3. And that includes 6 wins before that loss to Pittsburgh. This is a team that plays Virginia Cavaliers style of basketball that we know very well, right? An ugly style of basketball, make the game as ugly and as long as possible. Virginia is a team that relies on that defense. I'm not sure if it's pack line in the game, but if you're looking at this team just by the insights, it's a team that looks a lot like a normal Virginia team, playing at a slow pace, not a very good offense, great defense, and that's good enough for a positive net rating and more wins than losses. 310th offensive rating, a definite concern, and we'll get to that. 20th defensive rating, They limit possessions, and really just kind of keeping the ball out of their hands. Not the worst thing, because this is an offense that has really struggled. A very poor shooting team, the third worst field goal percentage in the country. I'll say it again. The third worst field goal percentage in the country. Virginia Cavaliers really struggles to shoot it, but because they're able to slow the game down, limit the amount of possessions, and the way that defense can wear teams down over 40 minutes, Virginia, especially late in the year, kind of seemed to figure out why that style made sense for them and started winning more of those games that were close in the end. They started hitting their free throws at a better rate. And the three seniors that they relied on all seasons really stepped up late in the year. It's led by Gary Donald and Brandon Leith, the forwards, and point guard Rod Milton. Donald is the highest scoring player on the team, averaging 13 points, 9 rebounds, and 1.4 blocks per game. He's important to what they do because he gives them a bit of versatility in matchups. When you're going up against a team like Oregon, it's got a little bit of size. Virginia, what they lack in size, they can challenge those big men by having multiple forwards like Donald and Leith that can switch everything and stay in front of the basketball. Rod Milton, 11 points, 4 assists per game, but 90% free throw shooter. He's been very important because late in games, when the ball's in his hands, he has proven to be pretty capable of closing things out for them. That's going to make things really tough for Oregon. I think this is a really tough matchup for them. You've got a young guard in Kevin Price that has had a great year, but is he going to be able to do it against a Virginia defense that has let very few players put up 20 plus points per game? Because of that, I actually favor Virginia in this game. I know it seems like maybe I'm going a little heavy on these upsets. But looking at this matchup, I think it favors Virginia because of that defense. They also looked really good in that Pittsburgh game. It's a close loss to a very good Pittsburgh team. But before that, they were playing really good basketball. And since the calendar, again, flipped to February, this is a team that's been playing really well. And they were doing it in the ACC, which proves to be, again, one of the better conferences in the country. I think Virginia's a tough out. I think they may even be a little underseeded as an 11. Oregon's coming in not playing great, 2 straight losses, 7-6 in those last 13 games. That's a concern for me. And because of that, I'm going to give the edge to the Hoos in that one. Virginia to win the 6-11 matchup. Finally, I get to my Gophers. I get to talk about something I actually know about, and that's Gopher ball. My Minnesota Golden Gophers, 15 net ranking. We had a good year, 24-8, 14-6 in the Big Ten. We have a really tough matchup and a tough road if we want to make it out of New Orleans. Even if we want to make it to New Orleans, it's going to be tough to do. Part of what makes it tough is we're doing it without Andy Love. Andy Love is our senior point guard. He was incredibly important to our hot start to the season. Some of you may know we started the year 20-2 and then ended a bit of a slide, going 4-6 in our last 10 games, including losing our last 2 games of the year, back-to-back games to Maryland. That was against Maryland in the quarterfinals of the Big Ten tournament, and also getting blown out by Maryland to end the regular season. When we lost Andy Love during that win over Wisconsin, now over a month ago, I was concerned about the rotation. I tinkered and I probably did a little too much. I probably should have stayed to what we were doing best. I switched things up a little too much, and it cost us late in the year. I'm hoping that I figured out the right rotation without Andy Love. I'm also hoping to maybe have him back. I think if we make the second weekend, there's a chance that Love could return. That would be huge. I think there were points kind of early in this season, especially when we had a run and we were kind of moving into the top 10 of the top 25, where I was thinking, maybe we could be an Elite 8 team. Without Love, we've lost our best perimeter defender, the guy that runs our offense in the half court. And those recent struggles in losing that guy have seen our shooting percentages drop. We're not getting to the free throw line as often. Our offense just in general has cooled down. We're still 15th in net ranking, but it's a 48th offensive rating, 25th defensive rating, a good team. And we really relied on our defense. And it's because of the style of defense we want to play. Gopher ball. We want to get up and down the floor, push the pace a bit, challenge you on defense, switch everything, stay in front of opponents. And when we've played our best, that style has led to big wins. And when we've played our worst, we always find ourselves in foul trouble. We lose the turnover margin. We miss our free throws. And that pattern of those 3 things, the foul trouble, turnovers, and the missed free throws, they've been a pattern in all of our losses. But when this team is good, it's good because of 2 players, and that's Cedric Julius and James Martin. Those 2 forwards have been incredibly important to us, and it also gives us some versatility, having Julius and Martin being able to play the 3, 4, and 5, where we can match up against bigger teams by bringing another center in. We can play Martin at the 5, and bring in another wing player, that sort of versatility has been very important to us all year. And those two have just been great. They're the only two players on Minnesota that are averaging double figures. They're both all Big Ten players, each averaging over 9 rebounds per game. James Martin has been a revelation this year. I did not expect the senior to have this type of year. Going into the year, Cedric Julius was, on the Norton watch list, someone that everyone was expecting, could lead the Big Ten in scoring, but it's been Martin who's averaged 20 points a game, but also very active defensively, 1.5 steals and 2 blocks a game. We constantly match James Martin up against the best offensive forward on other teams, or sometimes just the big man on other teams, and he's done a really great job all year. Cedric Julius has been really good as well, maybe slightly disappointing given coming in, we expected so much out of him, still averaging 16 points, 9 rebounds, and 3 assists a game. The surprising thing with Cedric Julius is how efficient he is as a scorer. He makes 42% of his threes. He's been great all year, but beyond those two, without Andy Love, we need someone to step up. So maybe it's the young point guard that's going to take over for Andy Love, Jabbar BAYLOR. Maybe it's Mike Diam, who's been in the starting lineup all year. Maybe it's someone like the freshman, Mike Collier, or Clifford Kitt, who once we got into the starting lineup kind of opened things up for us by being a great shooter and kind of a nice 3-and-D player is what Clifford Kitt has been all year for us. If someone else can step up, that's going to be huge, especially if we can just get through this first weekend, get to the second weekend, and Andy Love is back healthy. Having that senior back may be enough to push us into the Elite Eight and get us into, the final of the New Orleans Regional. I think that's on the table for us, but someone has to help us get there. This is going to be some of the last games James Martin plays as a Gopher. Same with Clifford Kitt, maybe Andy Love if we can get him back in time. But Cedric Julius is coming back next year, and I think a lot of it is because of the way we ended the year. We really thought we were going to win the Big Ten when Big Ten play started, and when we lost Andy, lost that momentum. I think everyone around the program right now is saying, hey, let's get things back to where we were. And I think we're going to have a chance, but as strange as it is, I'm putting us on upset alert. In the 3-14 matchup, we got a real tough game coming up against UMass Lowell. All right, the 14 seed in the New Orleans region, UMass Lowell. I'm going to try my damnedest to not do a bad fake Boston accent throughout this entire preview. But the Mass Lowell Riverhawks, 100th in net ranking, 21-11 overall record on the season. America East regular season and tourney champs. They were great once they got to conference play. They went 13-5, 9-1 in their last 10 games, including winning 4 straight. Cruised through the America East tournament without any issues, but really haven't played anyone this year. So it's a little tough to get an idea of how good this UMass Lowell team is. They've only played 2 tournament teams the entire year. Their season opening game against Georgia was a 16-point loss. They also played Illinois State, another team in this region, a 7-point loss early in November. But this is a team with a great offense, an offensive rating of 12th in the nation. As good as this offense is, unfortunately, they find themselves in a lot of shootouts. And in those coin toss games in the America East, they've come out on top most times. But early in the year, they were struggling, especially when teams were able to keep pace with them. That's something that UMass does really well. They pick up the pace, they score well, but unfortunately just allow a lot of points. They allow 76 points per game, and a defensive rating of 256 in the country makes you nervous. But when your offense is one of the 15 best in the country, you have something you can kind of hang your hat on, and that's exactly what UMass Lowell can do. They play really clean, not a lot of fouls, not a lot of turnovers, and when those two numbers are low, their fouls and their turnovers, they win. They're also a very good free throw shooting team, 79.6%. That's a big advantage they have over us. If this game is going to come down to free throws at the end, I'm a little nervous because this is almost an 80% free throw shooting team. That's 10th best nationally. We are not. We are not a good free throw shooting team. We were okay early in the year, but really struggled once we got into Big Ten play. So that is a concern that I have, is their free throw shooting. The other concern I have is Steve Montague, their sophomore guard. He's averaging 18 points per game. He's a 35% three-point shooter, their best offensive player, and someone that's a really tough matchup for us. The 2 Maryland losses we had late in the year is really because their guards got hot and we didn't have an answer. We didn't have a way to slow them down with what they were doing offensively. Montague kind of is going to play to that as well. He's someone that's going to really test our guards. And when we match up man-to-man, we're going to have to play really smart when we match up against Montague. Beyond Montague, the Riverhawks also feature 3 senior starters, Omar Martin, Jason Lockhart, and Marcus Bybee. Those three have been really important to what they do all year because it plays to their style of basketball. Get up and down the floor, try to play with an open offensive style. They've been good because they've played clean all year. And really the question for me and the question for anyone matching up for UMass Lowell, if they make it out of the first game, is if they make it a shootout, can you keep up? Because teams have had trouble keeping up with UMass Lowell, at least in conference play. That's my hope, is that UMass Lowell really hasn't been tested this season in the games where they have played better teams. They've really struggled. Because of that, I think I still favor us, but I think this is going to be a close game. I think UMass Lowell, that's just the way they play. They're going to put points on the board, and they're going to give up some on the defensive end, but they don't care. They've played that way all year. They're comfortable with it. And in a close game, they know they're going to hit their free throws, and they got some seniors that they've been relying on all year that have been great. It's a gulp for me. I'm nervous about UMass Lowell. I'm also nervous that I'm getting to the end of this and I haven't said anything in a Boston accent. So let me just end it with a quick microprocesses. If you get the reference, drop it in the comments below. Getting back to a macro view of the New Orleans region, I started it with Memphis and I'm going to end it with Memphis. I think they're the favorite to come out of here. I like them to get to the Final Four. I think they're one of the favorites to win the national championship. And I think this region sets up really nicely for them. They may be tested by Stanford if Stanford's able to get out of that bottom quadrant. And if Baylor or, maybe my Gophers can get there, that's a tough game because it's two capable teams with good players that can match up with Memphis. But Andre's the Giants, probably enough for Memphis to make it out of New Orleans. Looking at the rest of the region, I think there's some opportunities for some really good games. I think you look at the 8-9, that's a toss-up. The 7-10 and 6-11 matchups as well are toss-ups. Notre Dame in the 5-12, depending on who gets out of the play-in game, that's going to be interesting. You've got two good teams there. It makes for a really exciting region, some really good basketball. I can't wait for it to tip off. Hope you enjoyed the preview of the CBGM New Orleans Regional. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hope you enjoyed the preview. I'll talk to you soon.